Can you recall your very first dream? A sunken city resting beneath endless waters, towering spirals reaching upward through the darkness, kissing the pale moonlight, while countless souls drift in eternal stillness, yearning for the one who will finally stir them from their slumber. There exists a name that predates all recorded memory: Atlantis. But what if this was never merely legend? The vision now stands before you, waiting at your doorstep. Take a deeper breath and allow that ancient piece of your soul to resurface alongside the buried truths of history. If you find yourself captivated by tales such as this, the ones that dwell in the spaces between what our eyes perceive and what has been deliberately erased from existence, then feel free to like and subscribe, but only if your heart truly calls you to do so. And please, share with me in the comments below, where in this vast world are you watching from? What hour marks your present moment? There's something magical about witnessing our constellation of viewers illuminate across the globe, connecting us all through these forgotten stories. Perhaps you've dismissed it as imagination, those dreams where you walk through halls made of singing crystal, where light bends according to thought, where the very air thrums with possibilities our modern world has forgotten. But what if I told you these aren't fantasies? What if they're fragments of inherited memory, pieces of a puzzle your soul has been trying to complete across multiple lifetimes? Listen carefully, because the story I'm about to share isn't just about a lost civilization buried beneath ancient seas. It's about you, about who you were before the great forgetting, about the purpose that brought you back to this exact moment, reading these exact words, feeling something ancient stirring in the deepest chambers of your being. Modern science is just beginning to understand what the Atlanteans knew as basic principles of reality: that consciousness and matter are not separate phenomena, but different aspects of a unified field. That silicon-based structures can store and process not just information, but actual experiences, emotions, and aspects of personality. That properly programmed crystals can serve as interfaces between human consciousness and the fundamental forces that organize physical reality. The crystal technology they developed wasn't about mining and cutting gemstones for decoration or simple tools. It was about growing conscious crystals, programming them with specific intentions, creating living networks of silicon-based intelligence that could interface directly with human awareness. These crystals could store not just data in the way our primitive computers do, but actual experiential content, memories, feelings, intuitions, even skills and talents that could be transferred from one consciousness to another. When you hold certain crystals today and feel that strange tingling sensation, when you're drawn to particular stones for reasons you can't explain, when you sense that these mineral structures somehow respond to your thoughts and emotions, you're not imagining things. You're experiencing the activation of technologies that have been waiting in dormancy for consciousness to evolve to the point where they can be safely re-engaged. The great crystal at the heart of Atlantean civilization, the one that legends describe as tall as mountains, singing with the voice of the cosmos itself, wasn't destroyed when the civilization transitioned. It was dimensionally shifted, moved into a parallel frequency where it continues to broadcast, waiting for humanity to develop the coherence necessary to tune into its transmission once again. But that wasn't the only crystal. When Atlantis faced its final transition, smaller consciousness-programmed crystals were deliberately hidden in strategic locations around the planet. Some were buried beneath mountains that would later be considered sacred by indigenous peoples. Others were sunk in deep ocean trenches, where they wait beneath miles of water and sediment. Still others were placed in dimensional pockets, tucked into folds of space-time, where they exist just slightly out of phase with ordinary reality. These crystals aren't lost. They're in hibernation mode, maintaining their programming across millennia, waiting for the proper frequency activation. As human consciousness evolves and the planetary energy field shifts toward its next phase of development, these ancient technologies are beginning to come back online. This is why so many people report unusual experiences around certain geological formations, why dowsers can locate underground water sources and energy lines, why some individuals seem to have innate abilities to sense and work with subtle energies. Modern science tells us that humans appeared roughly 300,000 years ago. Yet we're taught that civilization began merely 6,000 years ago. with the first cities in Mesopotamia. What were we doing for those missing 294,000 years? Sitting around campfires, waiting for someone to invent agriculture, wandering aimlessly until we stumbled upon the idea of building permanent settlements. The official timeline makes no sense when you examine it closely. Hunter-gatherer societies don't simply decide one day to become agricultural civilizations. The transition requires sophisticated knowledge of plant genetics, soil management, water engineering, astronomical timing, and social organization that supposedly didn't exist. Yet this transformation happened simultaneously around the globe during the same narrow window of time, as if the knowledge suddenly became available everywhere at once. The answer lies in understanding that the genetic code carries more than instructions for physical development. Recent discoveries in epigenetics reveal that experiences can be encoded in DNA and passed down through generations. Trauma, skills, memories, even learned behaviors can be inherited at the cellular level. If negative experiences can echo through bloodlines, why not positive ones? Why not wisdom, knowledge, and expanded capacities? What we call junk DNA, the 98% of the human genome that doesn't code for proteins, may not be junk at all. It may be compressed archives of Atlantean knowledge, dormant programs waiting for the right activation sequence. This would explain the phenomenon of child prodigies who display impossible knowledge, artists who paint visions of places that officially don't exist, inventors who download technologies that seem to come from nowhere. You might be carrying this activation yourself. Have you ever known things without learning them? Felt drawn to specific locations with no logical explanation? Experienced déjà vu so strong it felt like memory bleeding through from another timeline? These aren't glitches in perception. They're glimpses of your authentic identity breaking through the amnesia barrier that was necessary during humanity's developmental phase, but is now beginning to dissolve. The activation doesn't happen all at once. It's a gradual awakening, triggered by specific circumstances, encounters, or states of consciousness. Some people experience it through meditation or dream work, others through exposure to certain frequencies, locations, or artistic expressions. Still others, through meeting individuals who carry complementary aspects of the genetic legacy. When the activation begins, it often feels disorienting at first. Suddenly you're experiencing memories that don't fit your personal history. You're drawn to create or explore things that have no connection to your training or background. You find yourself speaking truths you don't remember learning, feeling homesick for places you've never been, mourning losses you can't identify. This is the Atlantean heritage awakening within you, not as nostalgic fantasy, but as biological reality. You're not remembering a past life in the conventional sense. You're accessing the collective memory bank encoded in your species' DNA, the preserved wisdom of a golden age that was deliberately hidden until humanity was ready to integrate it responsibly. Sound was sacred in Atlantis, but not in the way we understand worship today. They knew that reality operates on vibrational principles, that the universe is essentially a cosmic symphony, and that conscious beings can learn to participate in its composition rather than simply listening from the audience. Their entire civilization was built around harmonic principles, not just their music and art, but their architecture, their social structures, their technologies, their methods of healing and education, even their approaches to agriculture and environmental stewardship. Every Atlantean temple was designed as a resonance chamber with specific acoustic properties that could induce altered states of consciousness, accelerate learning, facilitate healing, and enable communication across vast distances. The stories of telepathic communication that appear in ancient texts aren't fantasy. They're descriptions of consciousness operating at frequencies we've forgotten how to access, using technologies we've dismissed as impossible because we no longer understand the principles they're based on. This is why certain sounds affect you so profoundly, even when you can't explain the response. Why Tibetan singing bowls make your bones hum with recognition. Why chanting in groups creates that sense of unity that transcends ordinary social connection. Why specific musical frequencies can bring you to tears or fill you with inexplicable joy. Your cellular memory recognizes these vibrations as calling cards from home, signatures of the harmonic technologies that once connected consciousness across time and space. The Atlantean frequency is beginning to broadcast again, not through external devices, but through the awakening of dormant capacities within human consciousness itself. You can feel it in the rising interest in sound healing, in the rediscovery of ancient musical scales that affect consciousness in ways modern psychology is just beginning to study. You can sense it in the way people are instinctively seeking experiences that resonate with their deeper nature. Gatherings focused on transformation rather than entertainment, technologies designed to enhance rather than replace human capacity, communities organized around shared vision rather than mere convenience. But the most profound aspect of Atlantean frequency work wasn't the external applications, it was the understanding that each individual human being is essentially a biological resonance chamber, a living instrument capable of generating and transmitting specific frequencies that affect both inner states and environmental conditions. They developed techniques for tuning the human energy field, for calibrating the nervous system to optimal frequencies, for using the voice and breath as precision tools for consciousness alteration. These techniques are beginning to return through various forms of breathwork, toning, mantra practice, and vocal expression that goes beyond conventional singing. People are rediscovering that the human voice can be used not just for communication, but for healing, for environmental attunement, for accessing non-ordinary states of awareness, for harmonizing group consciousness during collaborative activities. When you find yourself humming unconsciously, when certain combinations of vowel sounds seem to create shifts in your energy field, when you're drawn to explore vocal techniques that you haven't been taught but somehow know how to do, you're reconnecting with technologies that were once as common as reading and writing are today. Close your eyes for a moment and breathe deeply. Feel how your heartbeat creates a rhythm against your ribs. But there's another pulse beneath that rhythm, older, deeper, more haunting. It's the echo of a civilization that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge, a golden age that makes our modern achievements look like children's drawings compared to masterpieces. We've been taught to think of human history as a steady climb from primitive caves to modern skyscrapers. But what if that narrative is backwards? What if we're not ascending from ignorance to enlightenment, but slowly remembering what we once knew? What if the ruins scattered across our planet aren't evidence of ancient peoples slowly learning to build, but fragments of something far more advanced than we dare imagine? The evidence whispers from every continent. It hums in the precision of megalithic stones that fit together without mortar, defying our understanding of how Bronze Age peoples could achieve such mathematical perfection. It resonates in the astronomical knowledge encoded in temples older than recorded history, structures that track celestial movements with accuracy that rivals our modern instruments. It pulses in the genetic memories that surface in dreams, in art, in the inexplicable technologies that seem to channel something we've collectively forgotten. But here's what the textbooks won't tell you. The forgetting wasn't accidental. It was necessary, a compassionate amnesia designed to allow human consciousness to develop certain qualities, resilience, creativity, independence, that could only emerge through the experience of limitation. Atlantis didn't fall as punishment for hubris. It transitioned out of physical reality because the cosmic cycles were shifting, and humanity needed to enter a long winter of apparent separation in order to develop the inner strength necessary for the next phase of evolution. That winter is ending now, and you, feeling this stirring in your chest as you read these words, are part of the awakening spring. Have you ever wondered why certain places affect you so powerfully? Why standing in ancient stone circles makes electricity dance along your spine? Why certain frequencies, whether in music, in nature, or in the silence between heartbeats, seem to activate something dormant in your cellular structure? This isn't psychological projection. This is biological recognition. Your DNA carries more than genetic instructions for building proteins and maintaining bodily functions. It carries architectural blueprints, harmonic frequencies, and consciousness technologies that were developed during humanity's golden age. Every time you feel that inexplicable longing for something more, every time you're moved to tears by beauty that has no logical reason to affect you so deeply, you're feeling the Atlantean signature awakening within your genetic memory. The civilization we call Atlantis wasn't built with the crude tools and simple technologies that archaeologists assume must have been available to ancient peoples. They developed something far more sophisticated, the science of consciousness interfacing directly with matter. They understood that physical reality is crystallized thought, that matter responds to properly focused intention, that the universe itself is a vast musical instrument waiting to be played by those who remember the ancient songs. Their temples weren't just places of worship, they were consciousness amplifiers, crystalline matrices designed to enhance human awareness and facilitate communication between dimensions. The great crystal at the heart of their civilization wasn't merely a power source. It was a lens through which collective human consciousness could focus its creative potential. When you stand in certain ancient places today and feel that familiar electric tingle, when your vision shifts slightly and the air seems to shimmer with presence, you're experiencing the residual field effects of technologies that work through harmony rather than force, through resonance rather than resistance. Words carry power, especially old words that have survived the erosion of centuries and the deliberate rewriting of history. Across the scattered tongues of ancient Earth, certain sounds appear with suspicious consistency. In the proto-languages that linguists claim gave birth to modern speech, ATL appears again and again meaning water, while AT signifies the sacred, the elevated, the divine. These aren't random coincidences of linguistic evolution, they're echoes of a mother tongue, fragments of the original human language that encoded reality itself through vibration. The Atlanteans understood something we've systematically forgotten, that sound shapes matter, that frequency governs form, that the right combination of tones could literally restructure the fabric of physical reality. Their cities weren't just built according to architectural principles, they were sung into existence, each stone placed according to harmonic laws that modern engineering doesn't even recognize as possible. This is why certain ancient sites around the world share impossible similarities, despite being separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The same megalithic techniques appear in Peru and Egypt, in Easter Island and Lebanon, in Ireland and India. Mainstream archaeology calls this independent invention or cultural diffusion, but these explanations crumble under closer examination. How do you independently invent technologies that we can't replicate today? How does culture diffuse across oceans that supposedly couldn't be crossed? The answer lies in understanding that Atlantis wasn't a single island civilization. It was a global network, a planetary culture, connected not primarily by ships and roads, but by consciousness itself. The Atlanteans had developed techniques for communication across vast distances through resonance fields, for sharing knowledge through what we might call telepathic networks, for maintaining coherent civilization across multiple continents through harmonic principles that unified rather than dominated. Consider the legends that persist across every culture on Earth, despite the supposed isolation of ancient peoples. The Mesopotamians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings of wisdom, who emerged from the waters to teach the arts of civilization. The Maya tell of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who brought knowledge from across the sea. The Egyptians honored Thoth, the architect of divine wisdom. The Aboriginal Australians remember the rainbow serpent who shaped the land during the dream time. The Hopis speak of the Kachinas, star beings who taught the sacred ways. These aren't separate myths created by unconnected cultures. They're scattered memories of the same event, the dispersal of Atlantean consciousness after the Great Transition, when the cosmic cycles shifted and maintaining a physical presence became energetically unsustainable. The carriers of the ancient wisdom didn't simply disappear. They seeded themselves across the globe, encoding their knowledge in myth, in monument, in the genetic memory of bloodlines that would carry the flame through the long night of forgetting. What we call technology today would have seemed primitive to Atlantean understanding. They didn't build machines to harness external power sources. They developed techniques to harness the infinite creative potential of consciousness itself. Their cities were powered not by fossil fuels or electrical grids, but by collective human intention, properly focused and amplified, through crystalline networks that worked more like living nervous systems than mechanical contraptions. This is why their ruins are so puzzling to archaeologists, who approach them with conventional assumptions about how ancient peoples must have lived and worked. How do you recognize the remains of a technology based on thought rather than mechanics? How do you carbon date a building that was materialized through focused intention rather than constructed with conventional tools and manual labor? How do you explain engineering achievements that required no engineering in the sense we understand it? The Atlanteans had mastered what we might call consciousness crystallization, the ability to take mental and emotional energies and stabilize them in physical form. They could literally think structures into existence, but not in the crude way that New Age philosophy sometimes suggests. It required tremendous training, discipline, and understanding of how consciousness interfaces with the quantum field that underlies all physical manifestation. Their buildings weren't just constructed, they were grown according to mathematical principles that reflected the fundamental patterns organizing reality itself. Sacred geometry wasn't decorative art for them. It was applied physics, a practical science for creating structures that would enhance rather than disrupt the natural energy flows of their environment. When you stand in certain ancient places today and feel that sense of being in the presence of something vast and benevolent, when the very stones seem to radiate a quality of peace or power that affects your consciousness, you're experiencing the residual effects of consciousness crystallization. These structures continue to broadcast the frequencies they were designed to hold, even after thousands of years of apparent abandonment. The return of these technologies won't happen through archaeological discovery or reverse engineering of ancient artifacts. It will happen through the development of human consciousness to the level where these principles become accessible again. As individuals and groups learn to work with subtle energies, to focus intention with laser-like precision, to collaborate at levels of harmony that transcend ordinary social dynamics, the technologies will naturally emerge. You may already be sensing the early stages of this emergence, the increasing interest in meditation and consciousness development, the growing recognition that thoughts and emotions have measurable effects on physical systems, the development of biofeedback technologies that demonstrate the intimate connection between mental states and bodily functions, the exploration of how group consciousness can influence environmental conditions and social outcomes. The fall of Atlantis wasn't random catastrophe or divine punishment for human arrogance. It was cosmic scheduling, the natural result of vast cycles that govern consciousness evolution throughout the universe. Earth moves through immense patterns of spiritual climate, periods of expansion and contraction, awakening and dormancy, that operate on timescales much longer than recorded human history. Atlantis existed during a previous peak in this cycle, a golden age when the veil between dimensions was thin, when consciousness could interface directly with matter, when human potential operated at levels that seem miraculous from our current perspective. As the cosmic climate shifted toward a period of spiritual winter, a time when consciousness would need to turn inward and develop new capacities through limitation and apparent separation.
Yes.
Atlantis gracefully transitioned out of physical existence. This wasn't punishment or failure, it was compassionate foresight. The civilization had grown too comfortable with its power, too removed from the humbling experience of limitation, too dependent on external technologies rather than the development of internal capacities. The transition to a world of apparent scarcity, struggle, and separation was necessary for consciousness to develop new muscles, resilience, creativity, independence, the ability to find light in darkness, to discover love in the midst of fear, to maintain vision even when surrounded by evidence of impossibility. But now the wheel is turning again. The cosmic winter is ending, and signs of the new spring are appearing everywhere for those who know how to read them. You can feel it in the quickening pace of change, in the breakdown of old structures that no longer serve, in the rising numbers of children born with extraordinary capabilities, in the awakening hunger for meaning that no amount of material success can satisfy. The return of Atlantean consciousness isn't happening through external discovery or official announcement. It's happening through internal activation, through the awakening of dormant capacities within human awareness itself. The lost continent isn't rising from the ocean, it's rising from the depths of human consciousness. And you, reading these words, feeling this recognition stirring in your chest, are part of that emergence. Ancient calendars from cultures around the world point to this time period as cosmically significant. The Mayan long count, the Hindu yugas, the precession of the equinoxes, the return of celestial bodies to alignments that occur only once in vast cycles, all suggest that we're living through a cosmic transition period, a time when old phases of development end and new ones begin. These aren't random predictions based on superstition. They're calculated observations based on understanding consciousness evolution, as precisely measurable as astronomical movements. Just as planets follow orbital patterns that can be predicted thousands of years in advance, consciousness follows developmental patterns that can be tracked and anticipated by those who understand the underlying principles. The awakening of Atlantean memory isn't nostalgic romanticism or escapist fantasy. It's evolutionary preparation. The challenges humanity faces today, environmental crisis, social fragmentation, technological disruption, existential confusion, require the integration of ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, spiritual insight with scientific understanding, individual development with collective harmony. We need to remember not just what the Atlanteans achieved, but how they achieved it through the marriage of inner development and outer creation, through technologies that enhanced rather than replaced human capacities, through social systems that supported individual fulfillment while maintaining collective coherence. You've always felt different, haven't you? Like you were born into the wrong time, the wrong culture, the wrong paradigm entirely. Like there's a homesickness in your heart for a place that never appears on any map, a longing for a way of life that you've never experienced, but somehow remember in perfect detail. Like you're constantly searching for your tribe, your purpose, your true identity, but the search itself feels familiar, as if you've been conducting it for lifetimes. This isn't psychological dysfunction or spiritual delusion. It's recognition. Your internal compass isn't malfunctioning. It's calibrated to a different frequency. Your soul isn't broken. It's oriented toward a civilization that exists in a higher octave of reality. And some part of you never forgot what that felt like when it was home. Across the planet, others are feeling this same stirring. They speak different languages, follow different paths, express their awakening through different art forms and life choices. But beneath the surface diversity, the same signal is activating. The Atlantean network is coming back online, not through technology, but through consciousness, not through organization, but through resonance. You recognize each other by the look in the eyes, that combination of ancient wisdom and childlike wonder, of deep knowing and innocent curiosity. By the way, conversations quickly move beyond surface topics to questions of meaning, purpose, cosmic connection, the nature of reality itself. By the shared sense that everything is about to change, not catastrophically, but beautifully, as if existence itself is about to remember what it was designed to be. These connections aren't coincidental meetings. They're arranged encounters, soul-level appointments that were scheduled before incarnation, during the planning phases, when conscious beings decide how to participate in the current phase of planetary evolution. The network operates through synchronicity rather than logistics, through resonance rather than recruitment, through inspiration rather than instruction. When you meet others who are walking this path, recognition is instant and undeniable. Conversations naturally spiral into deeper levels of exploration. Collaborative projects emerge effortlessly, as if the universe itself is providing support and resources for endeavors that serve the awakening. Skills and knowledge that seemed unrelated suddenly reveal themselves as complementary pieces of larger puzzles. This isn't networking in the conventional sense of using social connections for personal advancement. It's the reformation of soul family, the reconnection of consciousness groups that have been scattered across time and space, but never forgotten their essential unity. You're not building new relationships. You're remembering ancient ones, picking up conversations that were interrupted by the transition out of Atlantis, but never actually ended. The work you're called to do, the creative expressions that want to emerge through you, the healing modalities you're drawn to explore, the technologies you envision, the communities you want to build. These aren't random personal preferences. They're assignments, roles you volunteered for during the pre-incarnation planning process, contributions to the collective awakening that only you can make because of your unique combination of skills, experiences, and consciousness frequencies. The rediscovering of Atlantean principles doesn't mean rejecting modern technology or retreating to some imagined primitive paradise. It means remembering how to use technology as consciousness extension rather than consciousness replacement, as amplification of human capacity rather than substitution for human development, as bridges between beings rather than barriers to authentic connection. The most advanced Atlantean technology wasn't external machinery. It was the refined development of human consciousness itself, the ability to communicate heart to heart across any distance, to manifest desired outcomes through focused intention, supported by emotional coherence, to heal through energy transmission rather than invasive intervention, to access information directly from consciousness fields rather than requiring external databases and search engines. These abilities aren't supernatural in the sense of violating natural laws. They're natural capacities that have been dormant during humanity's long winter of separation consciousness, but which are beginning to reactivate as the cosmic spring returns. Children are demonstrating them spontaneously, often to the bewilderment of parents and teachers who haven't been prepared for the emergence of expanded human potential. Adults are rediscovering these capacities through meditation, energy work, consciousness development practices, and therapeutic modalities that address the whole being rather than just symptoms. The boundaries between healer and healee, teacher and student, leader and follower are beginning to dissolve as people recognize that everyone carries aspects of the greater wisdom that needs to emerge. The integration of heart and mind, emotional intelligence, working in harmony with intellectual capacity, was the foundation of Atlantean consciousness technology. They understood that the heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the human body, that emotional states directly influence mental clarity and physical health, that authentic power comes from alignment between feeling and thinking rather than dominance of one over the other. Modern neuroscience is confirming what the Atlanteans knew through direct experience, that the heart contains its own neural network, that emotional states can be measured and consciously modified, that coherent heart rhythms enhance cognitive function and intuitive access. Research into heart-brain coherence is revealing that humans have innate capacities for expanded awareness that can be systematically developed through proper training. But the Atlanteans went far beyond individual development. They created social systems based on collective heart-mind coherence, decision-making processes that could access group wisdom rather than just individual opinions, leadership structures that emerged organically from consciousness development rather than being imposed through force or manipulation. These approaches are beginning to emerge again through various forms of conscious governance, collaborative decision-making processes, and recognition that sustainable social organization requires the development of collective intelligence rather than just the aggregation of separate individual perspectives. Atlantean civilization was built on partnership with natural forces rather than domination over them. They understood that consciousness exists at every level of organization: planetary, elemental, botanical, mineral, and that true sustainability requires establishing conscious relationships with these intelligences rather than simply managing them as unconscious resources. Their technologies worked with these consciousness fields rather than against them, amplifying natural processes rather than replacing them with artificial substitutes. Their cities were integrated into ecosystems rather than imposed upon them. Their agriculture enhanced soil vitality rather than depleting it. Their transportation systems followed energy lines that already existed in the planetary grid, rather than cutting arbitrary paths that disrupted natural flows. This is why their ruins are so hard to find in the expected places, and why the structures that do remain often seem to have grown rather than been constructed. Much of their infrastructure was living rather than mechanical, evolved rather than engineered, developed through partnership with natural forces rather than domination over them. Gardens that served as both food production and energy generation systems. Forests designed as natural cathedrals for group consciousness work water systems that were simultaneously transportation networks, communication channels, and healing environments, cities that breathed with the rhythms of the earth rather than imposing artificial patterns upon the landscape. The return of Atlantean principles means remembering how to live as conscious participants in the Earth's ecosystem rather than unconscious exploiters of her resources. It means understanding that the planet herself is a conscious being with whom we can establish collaborative relationships based on mutual benefit and respect, rather than one-sided extraction. This shift is already beginning through the development of technologies that work with natural systems, permaculture approaches that enhance rather than deplete soil ecosystems, renewable energy systems that harness rather than disrupt natural forces, architectural designs that breathe with their environments rather than sealing themselves off from natural processes. But the most important aspect of this environmental renaissance isn't technological, it's relational. It's the remembering of how to communicate with the consciousness that inhabits natural systems, how to sense what the land needs rather than simply imposing human desires upon it, how to work as partners with the elemental forces that maintain planetary balance. Many people are already experiencing spontaneous reconnection with these capacities. The gardener, who somehow knows exactly what each plant needs without consulting books or experts. The architect who designs buildings that feel alive and harmonious without understanding why. The city planner who intuitively creates spaces that enhance community well-being. The inventor who downloads solutions that work with natural principles in ways that seem almost magical. These aren't random talents or lucky guesses. They're expressions of the Atlantean environmental consciousness awakening within contemporary humans, the remembering of how to participate consciously in the planetary intelligence that coordinates all life on Earth. Every Atlantean was, in some fundamental sense, an artist, not because they all made what we would recognize as art, but because they approached life itself as a creative medium, understanding that reality is malleable, that consciousness is the ultimate artistic tool, that existence itself is an ongoing collaborative masterpiece being created by all sentient beings working together. This artistic consciousness is beginning to emerge again through the renaissance of visionary art that depicts impossible landscapes and architectural forms that seem hauntingly familiar to those who view them. Through music that uses frequencies and harmonies that trigger altered states of consciousness and deep emotional responses that seem disproportionate to the simple sound waves entering the ears. Through literature and poetry that awakens dormant memories and catalyzes spiritual experiences in readers who had no expectation of such transformation. The new Atlantean artists aren't just creating entertainment or even inspiration. They're creating activation tools, consciousness keys, frequency transmissions that help awaken dormant potentials in those ready to receive them. Their work serves as bridges between dimensions, portals between timelines, reminders of what human creativity can achieve when it operates from expanded awareness rather than limited ego consciousness. You can recognize Atlantean-inspired art by its effect rather than its form. It doesn't just please or stimulate might, it changes something fundamental in your energy field. It doesn't just communicate ideas. It transmits frequencies that activate capacities you didn't know you possessed. It doesn't just express the artist's vision. It awakens your own dormant visions, your own connection to the source of infinite creativity. This renaissance isn't limited to traditional artistic mediums. It's emerging through sacred architecture that creates spaces conducive to expanded consciousness, through fashion and design that incorporates harmonic principles and consciousness-enhancing materials, through culinary arts that nourish not just the body, but the energy field and emotional body, through movement and dance that express and generate specific frequencies of awareness. The tools and techniques are different from those available in historical Atlantis, but the principles remain the same. Art as consciousness technology, creativity as spiritual practice, beauty as practical tool for planetary healing and human awakening. Many people are discovering that they have artistic capacities they never suspected, often emerging during times of personal crisis or spiritual awakening. The businessman who suddenly starts painting visions of crystal cities, the engineer who finds herself drawn to sacred geometry, and mandala creation. The mother who begins composing songs in languages she doesn't recognize, but somehow understands. These aren't hobbies or stress relief activities. They're expressions of the Atlantean creative consciousness, awakening within contemporary humans, the remembering of how to channel cosmic vision through individual expression, how to serve as instruments for the collective awakening that's occurring throughout human consciousness. Atlantean education wasn't about information transfer from teacher to student. It was about consciousness development, helping each individual discover and cultivate their unique gifts while learning to harmonize with the collective good. Students didn't just learn facts and skills. They developed the inner faculties necessary to access knowledge directly from the field of universal consciousness. Learning was experiential rather than theoretical, holistic rather than fragmented, individualized according to each soul's unique developmental needs, rather than standardized according to institutional requirements. The focus was on awakening latent potentials, rather than filling empty vessels with predetermined content. This approach is beginning to emerge again through alternative educational movements that recognize each child as a unique being with innate wisdom and specific gifts that require nurturing rather than molding. Through consciousness-based curricula that integrate intellectual development with emotional intelligence, creative expression, and spiritual awareness. Through teaching methods that engage multiple learning styles and honor different types of intelligence. The awakening of Atlantean educational principles includes remembering how to learn and teach in ways that honor the whole human being, not just the intellect, but the intuition, the emotions, the body, the energy field, the soul's deeper purposes. Education becomes a process of helping each individual discover and develop their unique contribution to the collective awakening, rather than producing standardized workers for existing economic systems. Teachers are remembering their roles as facilitators of awakening, rather than authorities dispensing information. Students are discovering their own capacity for direct knowing, for accessing wisdom through intuition and inner guidance, rather than relying entirely on external sources. The boundaries between teacher and student are dissolving as everyone recognizes that we're all learning and teaching simultaneously. This transformation isn't limited to formal educational institutions. It's happening in families, where parents are learning to honor their children's innate wisdom while providing guidance and structure. In workplaces, where mentoring relationships become mutual exchanges of insight and inspiration. In communities where everyone is recognized as having something valuable to contribute to collective learning. The technologies that support Atlantean-style education are beginning to emerge as well. Biofeedback systems that help students learn to regulate their own consciousness, states, virtual reality environments that provide experiential learning opportunities impossible in conventional classrooms, networking technologies that connect learners with mentors and resources based on resonance rather than just geographic proximity. But the most important aspect of the educational renaissance isn't technological laughing, it's the remembering of how to recognize and cultivate human potential in all its diverse expressions, how to create learning environments that support the development of whole beings rather than just intellectual capacities. Atlantean healing was based on understanding the energetic blueprints that underlie physical manifestation. Healers worked with the frequency patterns that create and maintain health, rather than just treating symptoms after disease had already taken hold in the physical body. Healing was seen as an art of consciousness, a process of helping beings remember their natural state of wholeness and teaching them how to maintain that state through proper attention to energetic hygiene. This understanding is returning through various forms of energy medicine that address the electromagnetic and subtle energy fields that organize physical structure, through frequency healing modalities that use sound, light, and vibration to restore coherent patterns in the body's energy systems, through consciousness-based therapeutics that recognize the intimate connection between mental-emotional states and physical health. The return of Atlantean healing wisdom doesn't mean abandoning proven medical technologies and pharmaceutical interventions. It means integrating them with deeper understanding of how consciousness and energy affect physical health, recognizing that true healing often involves addressing the mental, emotional, and spiritual factors that contribute to physical imbalance. Atlantean healers understood that illness is often a communication from the soul, a signal that something in the person's life is out of alignment with their deeper purpose or natural flow. Rather than simply suppressing symptoms, they worked to understand what the illness was trying to communicate and help the person make whatever adjustments were necessary to restore harmony. They also recognized that healing happens most effectively in coherent energy fields, which is why their healing centers were designed according to sacred geometrical principles and built in locations where natural energy flows were particularly strong. The architecture itself was part of the therapeutic technology, creating environments that supported the body's natural self-correction mechanisms. Modern research is confirming many principles that Atlantean healers took for granted: that electromagnetic fields affect cellular function, that emotional states influence immune system activity, that social connection and spiritual well-being are crucial factors in physical health, that the placebo effect demonstrates the power of consciousness to influence bodily functions. Healing practitioners trained in Atlantean principles are emerging across many different modalities. Doctors who incorporate energy assessment into their diagnostic procedures, therapists who work with the energetic dimensions of psychological healing, body workers who can sense and adjust subtle energy flows, counselors who help people understand the spiritual dimensions of physical illness. But perhaps most importantly, the Atlantean approach to healing emphasized that everyone has innate healing capacities that can be developed through proper training and practice. Healing wasn't the exclusive domain of specialists. It was a natural expression of consciousness, working in harmony with the life force that animates all beings. Perhaps the most significant aspect of Atlantean civilization was their integration of spiritual insight with practical knowledge. They didn't separate science and spirituality into competing worldviews. They understood them as complementary approaches to understanding the unified field of consciousness that underlies all manifestation. This integration is beginning to emerge again through quantum physics, explorations of how consciousness affects physical systems, scientific studies of meditation and prayer that demonstrate measurable impacts on brain function and environmental conditions, research into the effects of intention and attention on biological processes, and growing recognition that observer and observed are intimately connected in ways that traditional scientific methodology doesn't account for. The new paradigm doesn't require abandoning scientific rigor or returning to pre-rational thinking. It requires expanding scientific methodology to include consciousness as a fundamental force rather than an emergent accident, developing research approaches that honor both objective measurement and subjective experience, both intellectual analysis and intuitive insight. Atlantean science was based on direct experience of the interconnection between all phenomena rather than the assumption of separation that underlies much of contemporary scientific thinking. They understood that consciousness pervades all levels of organization, from subatomic particles to galactic structures, and that what we call laws of physics are actually habits of consciousness that can be consciously modified under certain conditions. This perspective is beginning to emerge in cutting-edge research into consciousness studies, in investigations of psychic phenomena that can be measured and replicated under controlled conditions, in exploration of how meditation and other consciousness practices affect not just individual brain states, but environmental conditions and even apparently random number generators. The return of sacred science doesn't mean abandoning rational thinking or accepting claims without evidence. It means expanding our definition of evidence to include the full spectrum of human experience, developing research methodologies sophisticated enough to study consciousness without destroying the very phenomena they're trying to investigate. Scientists, trained in Atlantean principles, approach their research as spiritual practice, understanding that the quality of consciousness they bring to their investigations affects the results they obtain. They work with rather than against the intelligence inherent in natural systems, asking questions that honor the mystery while seeking understanding that can be applied for the benefit of all life. Atlantean society operated on principles of abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition, contribution rather than accumulation. Their understanding of energy principles showed them that the universe operates on flow rather than hoarding, that giving and receiving are aspects of the same circulation, that individual fulfillment and collective prosperity are naturally aligned when consciousness is properly developed. This understanding is beginning to emerge again through alternative economic models that prioritize well-being over mere wealth accumulation, through gift economies and cooperative enterprises that demonstrate the viability of abundance-based thinking, through recognition that infinite growth on a finite planet requires shifting from material to consciousness-based values. The transition won't happen overnight, but the seeds are already sprouting throughout the global economy. New business models, based on purpose rather than just profit, investment strategies that consider consciousness development and environmental impact, alongside financial returns, technologies that democratize rather than centralize power and resources. Atlantean economics was based on understanding that real wealth consists of consciousness, creativity, relationship, and harmony rather than just accumulated objects and numerical abstractions. Money was seen as energy that should flow in ways that support life rather than stagnate in ways that create artificial scarcity and social division. Work was understood as service to the collective good rather than just personal survival or advancement. Each person's unique gifts were recognized and valued, creating economic systems that supported individual fulfillment while maintaining social coherence. Competition existed, but it was competition to see who could contribute most effectively to collective well-being, rather than who could accumulate the most resources at others' expense. The return of these principles is beginning through the development of local currencies that keep wealth circulating within communities, through business practices that prioritize stakeholder well-being over shareholder profits, through recognition that sustainable economic systems must be based on regeneration rather than extraction. Entrepreneurs inspired by Atlantean principles are creating enterprises that serve as vehicles for consciousness development as well as practical value creation. Investors are beginning to recognize that businesses aligned with spiritual principles often outperform those based purely on materialistic values. Workers are seeking employment that provides meaning and purpose rather than just financial compensation. Atlantean civilization at its peak wasn't governed by external authority imposed through force or manipulation. Decisions were made through councils that could access group wisdom. Leaders were recognized by their capacity to serve collective well-being rather than personal ambition, and social organization emerged organically from consciousness development rather than being imposed through coercion. This approach is beginning to emerge again through various forms of conscious governance, collaborative decision-making processes, and recognition that sustainable social organization requires the development of collective intelligence rather than just the aggregation of separate individual opinions. The transformation of governance systems will likely be gradual, emerging through local communities and organizations that demonstrate the viability of consciousness-based decision-making before being adopted on larger scales. The key lies in developing the inner faculties necessary for group wisdom, telepathic communication, empathic connection, and the ability to sense what serves the whole rather than just personal or factional interests. Atlantean governance was based on the understanding that leadership is a form of service rather than dominance, that authority should emerge from wisdom and spiritual development rather than being seized through political maneuvering or inherited through bloodlines. Leaders were chosen for their ability to facilitate group coherence and access collective intelligence rather than their capacity to impose their will upon others. This doesn't mean that Atlantean society was without structure or hierarchy, but their hierarchies were based on consciousness development and service capacity rather than social class or economic power. Those with greater wisdom and spiritual maturity naturally took on greater responsibility for collective well-being, while those still developing these capacities focused on their own growth and contributed to the collective in ways appropriate to their current level of development. The return of these principles is beginning through the emergence of leaders who see their roles as service to collective awakening rather than personal aggrandizement, through organizations that operate as communities of practice focused on mutual development, through recognition that sustainable social systems must be based on cooperation and shared purpose rather than competition and exploitation. Atlantean civilization was consciously connected to galactic and universal cycles of evolution, understanding their role as participants in cosmic development. Rather than isolated inhabitants of a single planet, they maintained communication with other evolved civilizations throughout the galaxy, participated in interplanetary councils, focused on supporting consciousness development across multiple worlds, and saw their own growth as part of a vast collaborative project spanning multiple star systems and dimensional levels. This perspective is beginning to return through growing awareness of our place in the cosmic community, interest in extraterrestrial contact and communication, and recognition that consciousness evolution on Earth is connected to larger patterns of universal development that extend far beyond our solar system. The awakening includes remembering our cosmic citizenship, our responsibilities as conscious beings participating in universe-wide evolution, our connections to other evolved civilizations that are also working to support the development of consciousness throughout the galaxy. The return of cosmic consciousness doesn't require waiting for official government disclosure or dramatic contact events. It happens through developing the inner faculties necessary for interdimensional communication, through expanding awareness beyond planetary boundaries, through recognizing that consciousness operates on scales much larger than individual human life. Many people are already experiencing spontaneous contact with cosmic intelligence through meditation, dreams, and other altered states of consciousness. The information received often focuses on the current transition period Earth is moving through, offering guidance and support for the challenging but necessary transformation of human civilization. The cosmic perspective reveals that what we're experiencing now isn't unique to Earth. Throughout the galaxy, civilizations are moving through similar transitions, evolving from separation-based to unity-based consciousness, learning to integrate individual development with collective harmony, discovering how to live in sustainable relationship with their planetary environments. The challenges we face as a species are part of a natural evolutionary process that all maturing civilizations must navigate. The awakening of Atlantean memory provides access to wisdom about how to move through this transition successfully, how to learn from previous attempts that encountered difficulties, how to apply universal principles in ways that work with contemporary conditions rather than simply trying to recreate past forms. Living with Atlantean memory while functioning in contemporary reality requires delicate balance and sophisticated inner development. You honor the awakening stirrings within you, while maintaining practical effectiveness in your current circumstances. You follow your deepest guidance while fulfilling your existing responsibilities. You prepare for the emerging paradigm while contributing constructively to the transition process. This integration happens through moment-by-moment choices to align with your highest understanding while remaining grounded in present reality. It means bringing more consciousness to routine activities, more love to challenging relationships, more creativity to problem solving, more vision to daily decisions. The goal isn't to escape this world for some idealized past or future. It's to demonstrate that the principles that created golden ages can be applied in any circumstances, that consciousness can transform any environment, that love can work through any limitations. The personal alchemy begins with accepting that you're living in multiple timelines simultaneously. Part of you exists in contemporary reality with all its challenges and limitations. Part of you remembers Atlantean Golden Age consciousness with its expanded capacities and harmonious social systems. Part of you envisions the emerging paradigm that's being born through the integration of ancient wisdom with modern knowledge. Your task is to serve as a bridge between these timelines, allowing information and energy to flow between them in ways that support the transition from the old paradigm to the new. This requires developing the capacity to hold paradox without needing to resolve it immediately, to live with uncertainty while maintaining vision, to work with what is while keeping sight of what's possible. The integration process often involves periods of intense purification as old patterns of thinking and feeling that are incompatible with Atlantean consciousness come up for healing and release. You may experience physical symptoms as your body adjusts to higher frequencies, emotional volatility as old traumas surface for clearing, mental confusion as belief systems reorganize themselves around expanded perspectives. These challenges aren't obstacles to the awakening process, they're integral parts of it. The human system needs time to integrate new frequencies and capacities, to release what no longer serves, to reorganize itself around more coherent patterns of functioning. You're not alone in this journey of remembering and integration. Across the planet, in every culture and every walk of life, people are experiencing similar stirrings, similar challenges, similar breakthroughs. The awakening is happening simultaneously throughout human consciousness, creating a critical mass of transformed individuals who can support each other through the transition process. The network operates through synchronicity rather than formal organization, through resonance rather than recruitment, through inspiration rather than instruction. When you meet others who are walking this path, recognition is instant and profound. Conversations naturally move to deeper levels of exploration. Collaborative projects emerge effortlessly, as if the universe itself is providing support and resources for endeavors that serve the collective awakening. This isn't networking in the conventional sense of using social connections for personal advancement. It's the reformation of soul family, the reconnection of consciousness groups that have been scattered across time and space, but never forgotten their essential unity. You're not building new relationships, you're remembering ancient ones, picking up conversations that were interrupted by the transition out of Atlantis, but never actually ended. The work you're called to do, the creative expressions that want to emerge through you, the healing modalities you're drawn to explore, the technologies you envision, the communities you want to build. These aren't random personal preferences, they're assignments, roles you volunteered for during the pre-incarnation planning process, contributions to the collective awakening that only you can make because of your unique combination of skills, experiences, and consciousness frequencies. As more individuals complete their personal integration process and begin functioning from Atlantean consciousness within contemporary reality, the collective field shifts. What once seemed impossible becomes increasingly possible. Technologies that seemed purely fantastical begin to manifest in practical forms. Social systems based on cooperation, rather than competition, begin to demonstrate their viability. Environmental solutions that work with natural systems rather than against them begin to scale up from local experiments to regional implementations. The transformation isn't happening through revolution or dramatic upheaval, but through evolution and gradual reorganization. The old systems don't need to be destroyed, they need to be transformed from within by people who understand both how they currently function and how they could function more harmoniously. What if I told you that Atlantis still exists, not as archaeological ruins scattered across ocean floors, but as a parallel reality operating at a slightly different vibrational frequency? What if the stories of its destruction were actually describing a dimensional shift, a transition from one level of existence to another, rather than complete physical annihilation? Quantum physics now acknowledges the possibility of multiple dimensions, parallel realities, alternate timelines, existing simultaneously in the same space, but at different frequencies. Mystics have spoken of these realms for millennia, using different terminology but describing the same phenomenon. Layers of reality nested within each other like infinite sets of Chinese boxes. The Atlanteans may have mastered dimensional travel long before their civilization reached its transition point. When the cosmic cycles shifted and maintaining a physical presence in third-dimensional reality became energetically unsustainable. They may have simply moved their entire civilization to a frequency band just beyond ordinary perception. This would explain the persistent dreams, the spontaneous memories that feel more real than real, the sense that somewhere, just out of reach, a golden age continues. It would explain why certain meditation practices, consciousness-altering techniques, and even some plant medicines allow people to access what seem like memories of impossible places and encounter beings who claim to be from Atlantis. They're not memories in the conventional sense. They're visits, brief dimensional slips into the parallel reality where Atlantis continues to thrive, where the technologies of consciousness are still in daily use, where the harmony between individual fulfillment and collective well-being has been maintained and continues to evolve. The gateway to this parallel Atlantis isn't located in any particular geographical location. It exists in consciousness itself, specifically in the quality of present moment awareness that the Atlanteans developed to a high degree. When you become completely present, when you release attachment to past and future and sink fully into the eternal now, you access the frequency where Atlantis continues to exist. This is why meditation and other consciousness practices often trigger Atlantean memories and visions. They're not creating fantasy experiences. They're providing access to aspects of reality that are normally filtered out by the linear, time-bound consciousness that dominates ordinary awareness. The more individuals develop the capacity for sustained present moment awareness, the more accessible the Atlantean frequency becomes. And as it becomes more accessible, information and energy from that parallel reality can flow into this one, seeding new technologies, inspiring new social forms, catalyzing new approaches to old problems. Ancient calendars and prophecies from cultures around the world point to this time period as uniquely significant in human and planetary evolution. The Mayan long count, the Hindu yugas, the precession of the equinoxes, the return of celestial bodies to alignments that occur only once in vast cycles, all suggest that we're living through a cosmic transition period, a time when old phases of development end and new ones begin. These aren't random predictions based on primitive superstition. They're calculated observations based on understanding consciousness evolution as precisely measurable as astronomical movements. Just as planets follow orbital patterns that can be predicted thousands of years in advance, consciousness follows developmental patterns that can be tracked and anticipated by those who understand the underlying principles. The awakening of Atlantean memory isn't nostalgic romanticism or New Age wishful thinking. It's evolutionary preparation. The challenges humanity faces today, environmental crisis, social fragmentation, technological disruption, existential confusion, require the integration of ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, spiritual insight with scientific understanding, individual development with collective harmony. We need to remember not just what the Atlanteans achieved, but how they achieved it, through the marriage of inner development and outer creation, through technologies that enhanced rather than replaced human capacities, through social systems that supported individual fulfillment while maintaining collective coherence, through economic structures that operated on abundance rather than scarcity principles. But we also need to learn from their mistakes, to understand why their civilization eventually reached a point where dimensional transition became necessary, to integrate that understanding into our approach to building sustainable golden age consciousness that can maintain itself across multiple cosmic cycles. The prophecies suggest that the current transition period offers an opportunity to not just recreate what was achieved in Atlantis, but to surpass it, to develop forms of civilization that can maintain harmony and continue evolving rather than reaching peaks and then declining into collapse or transition. This requires integrating the wisdom of many different evolutionary experiments, not just Atlantean, but also the insights developed by other advanced civilizations that have existed throughout galactic history. It requires understanding consciousness development as an ongoing process rather than a destination, recognizing that even golden ages are stages in infinite evolution rather than final achievements. So how does this apply to your life right here, right now? How do you bridge the gap between ancient memories that feel more real than reality and present responsibilities that demand immediate attention? How do you honor the Atlantean stirring within you while navigating a world that often seems hostile to expanded awareness? The answer lies in understanding that the awakening process is itself a form of initiation, a carefully designed sequence of experiences that gradually prepare you to hold and express higher frequencies of consciousness without being overwhelmed or destabilized by them. The first stage involves recognizing that your strange longings, your impossible memories, your unreasonable dreams are not mistakes or delusions. They are accurate perceptions of expanded possibilities, glimpses of your authentic nature breaking through the amnesia barrier that was necessary during humanity's developmental phase, but is now beginning to dissolve. The second stage involves learning to work with these awakening energies in practical ways, developing techniques for grounding expanded awareness in everyday activities, finding ways to express cosmic vision through available creative mediums, building bridges between the frequency you remember and the reality you currently inhabit. The third stage involves discovering others who are moving through similar processes, recognizing that you're not alone in this journey, beginning to collaborate on projects that serve the collective awakening while fulfilling your individual soul purposes. The fourth stage involves taking on greater responsibility for maintaining and transmitting the frequency, becoming a conscious bridge between dimensions, serving as an anchor point for Atlantean consciousness within contemporary reality. The fifth stage involves mastering the integration so completely that you no longer experience conflict between your expanded awareness and your practical effectiveness, demonstrating that Golden Age consciousness can function successfully within any external conditions. Each stage has its own challenges and gifts, its own lessons and initiations. The process unfolds according to divine timing rather than personal will, though your choices and commitment certainly influence how quickly and smoothly the transition occurs. The key is to remain patient with yourself while maintaining commitment to the process, to honor what's awakening within you while staying grounded in practical reality, to follow your inner guidance while fulfilling your existing responsibilities. The rediscovering of Atlantean principles doesn't mean rejecting modern technology or attempting to return to some romanticized pre-technological past. It means remembering how to develop and use technology as consciousness extension rather than consciousness replacement, as amplification of human capacity rather than substitution for human development. The most advanced Atlantean technology wasn't external machinery, but the refined development of human consciousness itself. The ability to communicate telepathically across any distance, to manifest desired outcomes through focused intention, supported by emotional coherence, to heal through energy transmission rather than chemical intervention, to access information directly from universal consciousness rather than relying entirely on external databases. These abilities aren't supernatural violations of natural law. They're natural capacities that have been dormant during humanity's long winter of separation consciousness, but which are beginning to reactivate as the cosmic spring returns and the planetary energy field shifts toward its next phase of evolution. Contemporary technology can be designed to support the development and expression of these capacities rather than replacing them with artificial substitutes. Biofeedback systems that help people learn to regulate their own consciousness states. Resonance technologies that amplify rather than mask natural human abilities. Communication systems that facilitate heart-to-heart connection rather than just data transfer. The integration happens through bringing Atlantean principles to contemporary innovations, designing technologies that enhance rather than diminish human potential, creating systems that support cooperation rather than competition, developing tools that work with natural processes rather than against them. This requires scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs who understand both contemporary technological possibilities and consciousness principles, who can serve as bridges between materialistic and spiritual approaches to innovation, who recognize that sustainable technology must be based on harmony rather than domination. Atlantean civilization was built on conscious partnership with planetary intelligence rather than unconscious exploitation of natural resources. They understood that Earth herself is a living being with her own consciousness, purposes, and evolutionary agenda, and that sustainable civilization requires establishing cooperative relationships with Gaia's intelligence rather than simply managing her systems as unconscious resources. Their technologies worked with natural forces rather than against them, amplifying ecological processes rather than replacing them with artificial substitutes. Their cities were integrated into existing ecosystems rather than imposed upon them in ways that disrupted natural flows. Their agriculture enhanced soil vitality and biodiversity rather than depleting them for short-term productivity. This understanding is returning through the development of technologies and practices that work in partnership with natural intelligence, permaculture approaches that enhance rather than deplete soil ecosystems, renewable energy systems that harness rather than disrupt natural forces, architectural designs that breathe with their environments rather than sealing themselves off from natural processes. But the most important aspect of the environmental renaissance isn't technological, it's relational. It's the remembering of how to communicate with the consciousness that inhabits natural systems, how to sense what the land needs, rather than simply imposing human desires upon it, how to work as conscious partners with the elemental forces that maintain planetary balance. Many people are already experiencing spontaneous reconnection with these capacities, the ability to sense what plants need without consulting books or experts, the capacity to design spaces that enhance rather than drain natural energy flows, the skill to work with weather patterns and natural cycles rather than fighting against them. These aren't mystical fantasies but practical abilities that were once common knowledge and are now returning as human consciousness evolves toward greater integration with planetary intelligence. The environmental crisis isn't just a technical problem requiring technological solutions. It's a relationship crisis requiring the restoration of conscious partnership between humanity and Gaia. As we reach the completion of this exploration, notice what's happening in your energy field right now. Has something shifted? Does the air feel different around you? Are you breathing more deeply, seeing more clearly, feeling more connected to the vast mystery of existence that flows through every moment? This isn't coincidence, it's activation. The frequencies encoded in these words, the memories they've stirred, the recognitions they've triggered, they're all part of the awakening process that's occurring throughout human consciousness. You're not just reading about Atlantis, you're remembering it, not from books, but from the living archives stored in your own cellular memory. The return of Atlantis isn't happening somewhere else to other people while you watch from the sidelines. It's happening here and now, through you, through every choice you make to align with love, rather than fear, vision, rather than limitation, cooperation, rather than competition, wisdom, rather than mere cleverness. You don't need to wait for external validation or official announcements. You don't need to convince anyone else, or gather followers, or create organizations. You just need to live from the truth that's awakening within you, to be the change you want to see in the world, to embody the principles that once created golden civilizations and can create them again. The ancient future is calling, and your soul is answering with recognition so deep, it feels like coming home after a journey so long you'd almost forgotten where you started. Welcome back, consciousness pioneer. Welcome back, bridge builder between worlds. Welcome back, carrier of the ancient songs that are being sung into new forms. The real work is just beginning, but you're not starting from scratch. You're continuing something that was never really interrupted, only paused for the cosmic seasons to turn. The spiral is completing another revolution, bringing you back to where you started, but at a higher level of understanding, carrying gifts you didn't have before, ready to plant seeds that can grow in contemporary soil. Remember this, Atlantis was never about a place. It was about a state of being, a frequency of consciousness, a way of living that honors the sacred in the ordinary, the infinite in the finite, the eternal in the temporal. That state of being is your birthright, your true nature, your ultimate destination, and your starting point. The journey back home isn't through space or time, it's through the layers of forgetting that have accumulated around your authentic essence, like dust on a mirror. Every moment of beauty, wonder, love, and truth is a step on that journey. Every choice to expand rather than contract, to include rather than exclude, to create rather than destroy, brings you closer to the frequency that was once called Atlantis and is now becoming the new Earth. You are the bridge between worlds, the translator between dimensions, the living proof that consciousness can embody in matter without losing its divine nature. The awakening is happening through you, and the future is being created by your choices in this eternal now. The dream continues, and you are both the dreamer and the dream. Welcome to the return of everything you've ever loved and hoped and known to be possible. Welcome to the resurrection of the golden age within your own beating heart. Now, close your eyes one final time. Feel that pulse, that ancient rhythm, that frequency that's been calling you home across the vastness of time and space. This time, don't just listen. Join the song. Add your voice to the chorus that's singing the new world into being. But there's more, so much more that needs to be shared before this transmission is complete. The layers of Atlantean reality run deeper than even the most comprehensive exploration can fully reveal in a single sitting. Let me take you further into the mystery, deeper into the remembrance that's stirring in your cellular memory right now. Have you ever wondered why ocean exploration feels so much like visiting another planet? Why the deepest parts of our own world remain more mysterious than the surface of Mars? What if this isn't accidental? What if the oceans hold secrets that go far beyond marine biology and geological formations? In the deepest trenches of the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans, acoustic anomalies have been recorded that defy conventional explanation. Sounds that seem too structured to be natural, too complex to be random geological phenomena. Sonar readings that suggest geometric formations at depths where no known civilization could have built with available technology. But what if available technology isn't the right framework for understanding what lies beneath the waves? What if the Atlanteans developed construction methods that worked with water rather than against it? What if their cities weren't built on land and then submerged, but were designed from the beginning to exist in harmony with oceanic environments? The ancient texts speak of crystal cities that could exist equally in air or water, structures that adapted their density according to environmental conditions, buildings that breathed with the rhythms of the tides. These weren't primitive descriptions of impossible magic. They were technical specifications for technologies we haven't yet learned to recognize. Deep ocean submersibles have photographed formations that seem to pulse with their own internal light, structures that appear to be geometric but move in ways that living systems move. The footage is usually classified or dismissed as equipment malfunction, but the patterns are too consistent across different expeditions and different ocean basins to be mere coincidence. What if these aren't ruins at all? What if they're active installations, Atlantean cities that transitioned into aquatic existence when the surface world became unstable? What if the dolphins and whales that demonstrate such sophisticated intelligence are actually in communication with these underwater civilizations, serving as intermediaries between surface dwellers and the deep ocean cultures that continue to thrive beyond human detection? The indigenous peoples of Pacific Islands have legends of underwater cities that can be accessed through specific caves or during certain tidal conditions. They speak of teachers who emerge from the depths during times of crisis, bringing knowledge and healing to surface communities before returning to the blue depths. These aren't mythological stories. They're historical accounts passed down through oral traditions that preserve information about ongoing relationships between land and sea civilizations. Modern free divers, who descend to extraordinary depths without equipment, often report encounters with intelligences that seem both ancient and utterly present, experiences of communication that happens without language, of being guided to specific locations where the water itself seems to shimmer with conscious presence. These encounters are too consistent and too detailed to be dismissed as nitrogen narcosis or decompression hallucinations. Beneath the surface of our planet, a vast network of crystalline formations creates a planetary nervous system that most humans have forgotten how to perceive, but which continues to function at frequencies just below ordinary awareness. This isn't New Age speculation, it's electromagnetic reality that can be measured with sensitive instruments and felt by individuals whose nervous systems have developed sufficient sensitivity. The ancient Atlanteans didn't just build their civilization on top of the Earth, they integrated it into the planetary energy grid itself, creating a symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and Gaia's electromagnetic field. Their cities served as conscious interface points where human awareness could connect directly with planetary intelligence, and where planetary wisdom could flow through human creativity into new forms of technological and social innovation. When their civilization transitioned out of physical existence, the grid connections didn't disappear. They went dormant, waiting for human consciousness to evolve to the point where these connections could be safely reactivated. That time is now. Across the planet, individuals with sufficient energetic sensitivity are beginning to feel the grid coming back online, one connection at a time. Have you ever been to a place, often an ancient site, but sometimes just a seemingly random location in nature, where you felt an unmistakable sense of being plugged into something vast and intelligent, where your entire energy field seemed to expand and your consciousness accessed information that had nothing to do with your personal experience or education? You were experiencing grid activation, your personal bioelectromagnetic field synchronizing with the planetary network that the Atlanteans helped to establish. These activation experiences are becoming more common as the Earth's magnetic field shifts and the Schumann resonance fluctuates in ways that haven't been seen for thousands of years. The planet itself is awakening from a long dormant period, and as she awakens, the consciousness technologies that were once integrated into her energy body are beginning to function again. Dowsers and energy workers have always been able to detect these grid lines, but now they're reporting that the lines themselves are changing, becoming stronger, connecting with each other in patterns that create entirely new geometric configurations across continents. It's as if the planetary nervous system is rewiring itself for a higher level of function, preparing to support forms of consciousness that haven't been active on Earth for millennia. The most sensitive individuals are reporting that they can feel information flowing through these grid lines, not in words or images, but in direct energetic transmission that bypasses normal sensory channels. Knowledge about healing techniques that were used in ancient times, technological innovations that work with natural forces rather than against them, social organizational principles that could resolve current global challenges in ways that benefit everyone involved. This isn't channeling in the traditional sense of connecting with discarnate entities. It's bioplanetary communication, human consciousness, learning to interface directly with the living intelligence that coordinates all life on Earth. The Atlanteans mastered this interface, and now it's becoming available again to humans whose awareness has developed sufficient coherence to handle the connection safely. Hidden within the structure of modern languages are fragments of older tongues that carried far more than meaning. They carried creative power. These weren't just communication systems, but actual technologies for interfacing consciousness with reality, for encoding intention into sound waves that could directly influence physical manifestation. The Atlantean mother tongue wasn't composed of arbitrary symbols assigned to represent external objects. Each sound was a frequency that resonated with specific aspects of universal structure. Speaking this language was a form of conscious participation in the ongoing creation of reality itself. Words weren't descriptions of what existed, they were instructions for what wanted to come into existence. Traces of this original language persist in the root words found in seemingly unrelated language families across the globe. In ancient Sanskrit, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Celtic Ogham, Hebrew Kabbalah, and even in the tonal structures of Chinese and various indigenous languages, patterns emerge that suggest common origins in a more sophisticated linguistic system than historical linguistics acknowledges as possible. Modern neurolinguistics is discovering that certain sound combinations trigger specific brainwave states and release cascades of neurochemicals that affect consciousness in measurable ways. Chanting specific syllables can induce altered states, facilitate healing processes, and even influence environmental conditions in ways that seem to violate conventional understanding of how sound waves interact with matter. But what if this isn't violation of natural law? What if it's application of natural principles that we've forgotten? What if the Atlanteans understood language as applied physics, using vocal techniques to create resonance effects that could restructure matter at the molecular level? The most ancient mantras and power words found in spiritual traditions around the world may be fragments of Atlantean language technologies, preserved through oral tradition by lineages that maintained the knowledge even when they no longer understood the scientific principles underlying the practices. When pronounced correctly, with proper intention and energetic coherence, these sounds still produce effects that seem miraculous from contemporary perspectives. Researchers studying the acoustic properties of ancient temples have discovered that many were designed as resonance chambers, specifically tuned to amplify certain vocal frequencies. When groups chant specific sounds in these spaces, the architecture itself begins to vibrate in ways that induce altered states of consciousness in everyone present. The buildings were designed as language amplifiers, consciousness technologies disguised as religious architecture. Some individuals are beginning to remember fragments of the original language spontaneously. They find themselves speaking or singing in tongues that they've never learned, but that feel completely familiar. When recorded and analyzed, these utterances often display mathematical relationships and frequency patterns that correspond to natural phenomena, the spiral of galaxies, the growth patterns of plants, the electromagnetic signatures of human organ systems. Within the structure of human DNA lies a timing mechanism that activates specific capacities according to cosmic cycles rather than personal will or educational effort. The Atlanteans understood this biological programming and designed their civilization to work in harmony with these natural activation sequences rather than trying to force development through external methods. What we call evolution isn't just random mutation and natural selection operating over millions of years. It's a coordinated awakening of potentials that were always present in the genetic code but dormant until planetary and cosmic conditions aligned to support their expression. The Atlantean Golden Age occurred during a previous activation cycle, and we're now entering another such period. This explains why children are being born with capacities that their parents don't possess and can't explain through heredity or education. Enhanced intuition, sensitivity to subtle energies, ability to perceive information through non-physical channels, natural understanding of technologies that haven't been invented yet. These aren't mutations but activations of genetic programs that have been waiting for the right environmental triggers. The triggers aren't just cosmic radiation and electromagnetic field changes, though these play important roles. They're also consciousness-based. As more individuals achieve certain levels of awareness and emotional coherence, they create morphic fields that make similar states more accessible to others. The awakening is contagious in the most literal sense. Consciousness changes propagate through quantum field effects that influence genetic expression patterns. Advanced meditators and energy healers have been documenting changes in their own DNA that correlate with periods of intensive spiritual practice, telomeres lengthening instead of shortening with age, dormant gene sequences becoming active, cellular regeneration rates increasing beyond normal parameters. These aren't supernatural miracles, but natural responses to consciousness states that most humans haven't accessed for thousands of years. The Atlantean genetic legacy isn't distributed equally among all humans. Certain bloodlines carry higher concentrations of the activated sequences, which is why some individuals experience spontaneous awakening while others require more intensive preparation. But everyone carries at least some of the dormant programming, and under the right conditions, anyone can begin to activate their Atlantean inheritance. The activation process often begins with what seems like crisis or breakdown. Old patterns of thinking and feeling that are incompatible with expanded consciousness create internal conflicts that force the system to reorganize at a higher level of coherence. What looks like spiritual emergency is actually spiritual emergence. the birth process of your authentic self breaking through the shell of conditioned limitations. Physical symptoms are common during activation periods. Unusual sensations in the nervous system, changes in sleep patterns, heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, spontaneous healing of chronic conditions, or temporary exacerbation of health issues as the body releases stored trauma and recalibrates to higher frequencies. Contemporary physics is beginning to acknowledge what mystical traditions have always claimed, that reality consists of multiple dimensions existing simultaneously in the same space, but at different frequencies. What we perceive as the physical world is just one band in a vast spectrum of dimensional reality. The Atlanteans mastered dimensional technology long before their civilization faced transition. They could shift between frequency bands at will, accessing parallel realities where different versions of their civilization developed according to alternative choices and possibilities. Their libraries contain not just books, but dimensional gateways to alternate timelines where variations of Atlantean culture continued to evolve. When the time came for their primary civilization to transition out of third-dimensional reality, they didn't simply disappear. They shifted to parallel frequency bands where they could continue their development without the limitations that were becoming apparent in the primary timeline. These parallel Atlantean civilizations continue to exist and evolve, occasionally intersecting with our reality through dimensional overlap zones. Certain locations on Earth serve as natural dimensional gateways, where the veils between realities are thinner than normal. Ancient sites often mark these locations because indigenous peoples recognized their special properties and built temples or ceremonial structures to work with the dimensional energies. Modern sensitive individuals often report unusual experiences at these sites, encounters with beings from other realities, visions of alternate versions of history, and temporary shifts in consciousness that provide access to information from parallel timelines. The Bermuda Triangle and other so-called anomalous zones may be locations where dimensional boundaries fluctuate naturally, creating conditions where objects and people can accidentally shift between realities. Rather than being danger zones to be avoided, these might be opportunities to study dimensional physics and learn to navigate between parallel worlds intentionally. Some individuals are beginning to develop natural dimensional sensitivity. They report experiences of being in multiple realities simultaneously, in accessing memories from parallel versions of themselves, receiving guidance from Atlantean mentors who exist in alternate dimensions. These aren't psychological dissociations, but expansions of consciousness beyond the limitations of single timeline awareness. The development of dimensional sensitivity requires careful preparation because the human nervous system needs time to adapt to processing multiple reality streams without becoming confused or destabilized. Traditional meditation practices often included dimensional awareness training, though the terminology used was symbolic rather than literal. Dreams may be one of the most common ways that people access parallel Atlantean realities. The dream state naturally shifts consciousness to frequencies where linear time doesn't operate normally, making contact with alternate timelines more accessible. Recurring dreams of crystal cities, underwater civilizations, or advanced technologies might be dimensional visits rather than symbolic imagery. The Atlanteans developed healing methods based on understanding that illness is fundamentally disharmony, disruption of the natural frequency patterns that maintain healthy function in living systems. Rather than treating symptoms with substances that override natural processes, they used harmonic technologies to restore coherent resonance patterns that allowed the body's own intelligence to correct imbalances. These healing frequencies are beginning to be rediscovered through various research paths. Scientists studying the acoustic properties of ancient healing temples have found that many were designed to generate specific sound frequencies that correspond to optimal brainwave states and cellular regeneration patterns. The architecture itself was medical technology, creating acoustic environments that facilitated healing through resonance rather than chemical intervention. Bioacoustic research is revealing that every organ system in the human body has its own characteristic frequency signature, and that illness can be detected and treated by monitoring and adjusting these frequency patterns. Sound healing technologies are being developed that can identify diseased tissue through frequency analysis and restore healthy function through targeted acoustic treatments. The emerging field of biofield science is documenting the electromagnetic signatures that surround living systems and investigating how these energy fields influence physical health. Healers who work with subtle energies are being studied scientifically, and their abilities to influence biofield patterns in ways that promote healing are being measured and verified under controlled conditions. Crystalline healing technologies are also beginning to be understood scientifically. Certain crystal structures can generate piezoelectric fields when subjected to pressure or vibration, and these fields can influence cellular processes in ways that promote healing and regeneration. The Atlanteans may have used large crystal arrays as medical devices, creating coherent energy fields that could diagnose and treat illness at the energetic level before physical symptoms manifested. Color and light therapy are revealing connections between specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation and biological processes. Different colors of light can stimulate or calm various physiological functions, influence mood and mental clarity, and even affect genetic expression patterns. The Atlanteans may have used sophisticated light technologies for both healing and consciousness enhancement. Homeopathic medicine, despite being dismissed by mainstream science, may preserve fragments of Atlantean healing wisdom. The principle that water can retain energetic signatures of substances, even when no molecules remain, could be understood as frequency medicine, using the vibrational patterns of healing substances without the potential side effects of their material forms. Modern agriculture treats soil as an inert medium for supporting plant life. But the Atlanteans understood soil as a living ecosystem with its own intelligence and consciousness. They developed farming methods based on partnership with soil organisms, plant spirits, and the elemental forces that coordinate natural growth cycles. Their gardens weren't just food production systems, but consciousness interface zones where human awareness could connect directly with plant intelligence and learn from the wisdom that coordinates all natural systems. Each plant was recognized as an individual being with its own gifts and purposes, and cultivation was approached as collaborative relationship rather than domination over nature. Permaculture pioneers are rediscovering some of these principles through careful observation of natural ecosystems and experimentation with farming methods that work with rather than against natural processes. They're finding that soil health can be dramatically improved through techniques that seem almost magical from conventional agricultural perspectives, using sound frequencies to stimulate beneficial microbial activity, employing crystal grids to enhance plant growth, working with lunar and planetary cycles for optimal planting and harvesting timing. Biodynamic agriculture preserves many Atlantean farming principles through methods developed by Rudolf Steiner, based on his clairvoyant research into the spiritual dimensions of agricultural processes. These techniques treat the farm as a living organism and use homeopathic preparations made from plant, mineral, and animal substances to enhance soil vitality and plant health in ways that seem to violate materialistic assumptions about how agriculture works. Some farmers are beginning to report direct communication experiences with plant intelligence, receiving information about optimal growing conditions, learning which plants want to grow together for mutual benefit, being guided to identify and treat plant diseases through energetic methods rather than chemical interventions. These experiences are becoming more common as human consciousness evolves toward greater sensitivity to natural intelligence. The return of Atlantean agricultural consciousness doesn't mean abandoning productive farming methods or returning to primitive subsistence agriculture. It means integrating the wisdom of natural systems with contemporary knowledge and technology to create farming approaches while enhancing rather than depleting ecosystem health. Urban farming projects are demonstrating that food production can be integrated into city environments in ways that improve air quality, strengthen community connections, and provide educational opportunities for children to learn about natural processes. Vertical growing systems are making it possible to produce large quantities of food in small spaces, while using minimal water and no soil. Every structure built by the Atlanteans was designed according to sacred geometrical principles that reflect the fundamental patterns organizing reality itself. They understood that geometric forms aren't just aesthetic choices, but consciousness technologies that can influence mental states, emotional responses, and even physical health through their effects on bioelectromagnetic fields. The golden ratio, Fibonacci spirals, and other mathematical relationships found throughout natural systems were incorporated into Atlantean architecture, not as decorative elements, but as functional technologies for creating environments that enhanced human potential rather than limiting it. Buildings were designed to amplify meditation states, facilitate group consciousness experiences, and support optimal physical health through their geometric influences on human energy fields. These principles are beginning to be rediscovered through research into how architectural environments affect human psychology and physiology. Studies show that certain room proportions, ceiling heights, and spatial relationships can influence creativity, concentration, emotional well-being, and even immune system function in measurable ways. Ancient temples and ceremonial sites around the world demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sacred geometry. The Great Pyramid's proportions encode mathematical relationships that appear throughout natural systems. Gothic cathedrals use specific geometric ratios that create acoustic and visual effects designed to induce altered states of consciousness. Stonehenge and other megalithic sites are positioned according to astronomical alignments that connect earthly structures with cosmic cycles. Modern architects are beginning to integrate sacred geometrical principles into contemporary building design. Some report that structures designed according to these principles seem to have their own presence or consciousness, affecting everyone who enters them in ways that go beyond mere aesthetic appreciation. The emerging field of consciousness architecture recognizes that buildings influence human awareness through more than just functional design. The geometric patterns, material choices, proportional relationships, and energy flow patterns within structures can either support or hinder human potential depending on whether they align with or conflict with the mathematical principles that organize consciousness itself. Healing centers, designed according to sacred geometrical principles, report enhanced therapeutic outcomes. Educational facilities, built with these principles, seem to facilitate learning and creativity in ways that conventional architecture doesn't achieve. Even residential buildings designed with geometric consciousness create home environments that support family harmony and individual well-being. The Atlanteans maintained conscious relationships with elemental forces, the intelligent energies that coordinate the behavior of fire, water, air, and earth. These weren't primitive animistic superstitions, but sophisticated understanding of how consciousness operates at different levels of organization within natural systems. Each element was recognized as having its own form of intelligence and its own role in maintaining planetary balance. Fire consciousness coordinated transformation processes. Water consciousness facilitated flow and adaptation. Air consciousness enabled communication and movement. Earth consciousness provided stability and manifestation. Human consciousness was understood as the integrating factor that could work with all elemental forces to create outcomes that served the whole. Whether working was a natural extension of elemental partnership. Atlantean weather workers didn't control atmospheric conditions through force, but invited cooperation from air and water, elementals through respectful communication and offerings of conscious attention. They could encourage rain during droughts, calm storms that threaten communities, and maintain optimal atmospheric conditions for agriculture and transportation. These abilities are beginning to return as human consciousness evolves toward greater sensitivity to elemental intelligence. Some individuals report spontaneous experiences of influencing weather patterns through meditation or ceremony. Native American and other indigenous traditions preserve weather working techniques through rain dances, wind ceremonies, and other practices that mainstream culture dismisses as superstition, but which sometimes produce measurable results. The partnership approach to elemental forces offers solutions to environmental challenges that technological approaches alone cannot achieve. Working with fire elementals could help prevent destructive wildfires while maintaining the natural fire cycles that forest ecosystems require. Cooperation with water elementals could help resolve drought conditions and flooding problems. Air elemental partnerships could address atmospheric pollution and climate disruption. Elemental partnership requires developing sensitivity to the consciousness that inhabits natural forces rather than treating them as unconscious resources to be manipulated. This involves learning to communicate through intuition and energetic resonance, rather than just mechanical intervention, approaching natural systems as conscious beings worthy of respect, rather than machines to be controlled. Sacred sites around the world often mark locations where elemental forces are particularly concentrated and accessible. These places serve as natural classrooms where humans can learn to perceive and interact with elemental intelligence. Spending time in such locations with proper intention and attention can help develop the sensitivity necessary for conscious elemental partnership. The new Atlantean civilization won't be built primarily in physical locations but in consciousness space, creating coherent energy fields that can support expanded human potential wherever they're established. These crystalline cities of light exist first as frequency patterns that can be anchored into physical reality through groups of individuals who maintain sufficient coherence and shared vision. Each city begins with a seed group of people who share similar frequencies and complementary skills, gathering either physically or through consciousness connection to establish a stable morphic field that can attract additional aligned individuals and manifest the resources necessary for physical expression. The architecture of these new cities incorporates sacred geometrical principles, consciousness-enhancing technologies, and environmental harmony in ways that support both individual development and collective cooperation. Buildings serve as consciousness amplifiers, transportation systems work with natural energy flows, and economic structures operate on abundance principles that ensure everyone's needs are met while supporting continued growth and evolution. These cities won't be isolated communes withdrawn from contemporary society, but demonstration centers that show how Atlantean principles can be applied successfully within modern conditions. They serve as bridges between the old paradigm and the new, offering practical examples of how ancient wisdom can address current challenges. Some communities around the world are already beginning to manifest aspects of this vision. Eco-villages that integrate sustainable technology with spiritual practice. Intentional communities that experiment with consensus decision-making and resource sharing. Educational centers that combine academic learning with consciousness development. Healing centers that integrate medical and holistic approaches. The manifestation process requires balancing visionary inspiration with practical implementation skills. Dreamers must learn to work with builders. Spiritual seekers must collaborate with business developers. Individual growth must be integrated with collective responsibility. The challenges are significant, but the potential rewards include demonstrating that human civilization can operate according to principles of harmony rather than competition. Technology plays a supporting rather than dominating role in these new cities. Devices are designed to enhance rather than replace human capacities, to facilitate connection rather than isolation, to support natural processes rather than disrupting them. The most advanced technologies work at consciousness interfaces, helping individuals and groups access expanded states of awareness and coordinate their activities according to intuitive guidance rather than just rational planning. The Atlanteans were part of a galactic network of evolved civilizations that maintained communication across vast distances through consciousness technologies rather than electromagnetic transmission. This galactic council coordinated the development of consciousness throughout different star systems, sharing wisdom and resources to support the evolution of awareness wherever it was emerging. Earth's representative to this council during Atlantean times was selected based on consciousness development rather than political power, serving as a communication interface between planetary and galactic intelligence. When Atlantis transitioned out of physical existence, Earth temporarily lost its conscious connection to the galactic network, entering a period of quarantine that allowed human consciousness to develop independently. That quarantine is now ending as human awareness evolves to levels that can handle galactic contact responsibly. Individuals around the world are beginning to experience spontaneous contact with galactic intelligence through meditation, dreams, and altered states of consciousness. The information received often focuses on supporting the current transition period and preparing humanity for eventual membership in the galactic community. These contacts aren't with science fiction-style extraterrestrials traveling in mechanical spacecraft, but with evolved consciousnesses that exist primarily in energy form and can interface with human awareness through telepathic and empathic channels. The beings involved have already graduated from physical existence, but maintain connection with developing worlds to offer guidance and support. The communications often emphasize that humanity's development is being watched with great interest and compassion by many galactic civilizations, but that direct intervention isn't permitted unless specifically requested through proper channels. The primary support comes through frequency transmissions that help stabilize human consciousness during the transition period and provide access to information that can help resolve current planetary challenges. Preparation for conscious galactic contact involves developing sufficient inner coherence to handle expanded awareness without becoming destabilized or inflated by the experience. This requires emotional maturity, spiritual development, and practical grounding that allows individuals to serve as stable interfaces between human and galactic consciousness. The emerging galactic communications aren't meant to create new authority structures or dependency relationships, but to support human sovereignty and independent development. The goal is to assist humanity in graduating to galactic citizenship while maintaining the unique gifts and perspectives that Earth consciousness brings to the cosmic community. Groups are beginning to form specifically for the purpose of establishing conscious communication with galactic intelligence and preparing for eventual open contact. These groups focus on developing the consciousness technologies necessary for stable interdimensional communication while maintaining grounding in practical earthly concerns. The Atlantean economic system operated on principles that seem impossible from contemporary perspectives, but which may be exactly what humanity needs to resolve current economic challenges. Instead of competition for limited resources, their system was based on recognizing that consciousness and creativity are unlimited resources that can generate material abundance when properly organized. Work was understood as creative expression and service to the collective good rather than just survival necessity. Each individual's unique gifts were recognized and valued, creating economic flows that supported everyone's optimal development while meeting all material needs efficiently. Competition existed, but it was competition to see who could contribute most effectively to collective well-being rather than who could accumulate the most personal wealth. Money existed, but functioned more like energy that needed to flow continuously to maintain system health rather than like property that could be accumulated and hoarded. Wealth concentration was prevented not through regulations, but through understanding that economic stagnation occurs naturally when resources aren't circulating effectively. These principles are beginning to be rediscovered through alternative economic experiments around the world. Local currencies that keep wealth circulating within communities, gift economies that operate on abundance principles rather than scarcity assumptions, cooperative enterprises that prioritize stakeholder well-being over shareholder profits, time banks that allow people to exchange services based on time contributed rather than monetary value. The blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies that are disrupting traditional financial systems may be preparing the infrastructure for economic systems that operate according to Atlantean principles. Decentralized networks that eliminate the need for intermediary institutions, smart contracts that can automatically execute agreements based on predetermined conditions, digital currencies that can be programmed to circulate rather than accumulate. Universal basic income experiments are testing whether providing everyone with basic economic security frees them to pursue creative and service activities that contribute more value to society than traditional employment structures. Early results suggest that guaranteed basic income actually increases productivity and innovation rather than reducing motivation to work. The transition to Atlantean economic principles won't happen through revolution that destroys existing systems, but through evolution that gradually transforms them from within. New economic models will prove their viability by producing better outcomes for everyone involved, eventually attracting enough participation to become mainstream alternatives to scarcity-based systems. As we reach the true completion of this exploration, something has fundamentally shifted in your energy field. You can feel it, can't you? The recognition that's been building throughout this journey, the remembrance that's been stirring in the depths of your cellular memory, the awakening that's been calling your name across the vastness of time. You are not reading about Atlantis as if it were ancient history, occurring to other people in distant times. You are remembering your own participation in that golden age, recognizing your own face in the mirror of deep time, feeling your own heart beat in rhythm with the cosmic pulse that once coordinated an entire civilization around principles of harmony and love. The longing you've carried, the homesickness for a world that seemed too beautiful to be real, the ache for meaning and purpose that no external achievement could satisfy. These weren't fantasy or delusion. They were your soul's accurate memory of what life feels like when consciousness and matter dance together in conscious partnership, when individual fulfillment and collective well-being enhance each other, when technology serves love rather than replacing it. You've always known there was more to human potential than what's demonstrated in contemporary culture, more to your own capacities than what's acknowledged by current educational and social systems, more to existence itself than what can be measured by instruments or explained by theories. That knowing wasn't imagination, it was recognition. Your deep self remembering what it felt like to be fully human during a time when humanity had not forgotten its cosmic heritage. The return of Atlantis is happening through you right now, not through archaeological discoveries or government disclosures or technological inventions, though these may play supporting roles. The real return is happening in consciousness through individuals like you who are willing to remember who they truly are and begin living from that authentic identity, regardless of external conditions. Every choice you make to follow your deepest guidance, rather than conforming to social expectations, is a vote for the new paradigm. Every moment you choose love over fear, truth over convenience, vision over limitation, you strengthen the morphic field that's calling the golden age back into manifestation. Every relationship you approach as an opportunity for mutual awakening, rather than personal gratification, helps weave the social fabric that can support expanded human potential. You don't need anyone's permission to begin. You don't need external validation or official recognition. You don't need to wait for better conditions, or more resources, or clearer instructions. The time is now, the place is here, and the person responsible for your portion of the great work is you. The ancient future is not coming, it has arrived. The golden age is not approaching, it is emerging through your willingness to embody its principles in your daily life. The return of Atlantis is not a future event, it is a present choice, made new each moment, renewed with each breath, reaffirmed with every heartbeat that chooses love over fear. This journey doesn't end here, it's only just beginning. If this message has awakened something within you, subscribe to join us on this path of discovery. Hit the like button to help this message reach others who are ready to remember, and share your own awakening experiences in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into the research behind Atlantis's return, check out the resources we've linked in the description, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we unveil more hidden truths. But before you go, let me leave you with this thought. What if I told you that Atlantis wasn't just a legend, but a civilization that still exists, not in our physical dimension, but in a parallel reality that some people can still access? What if the technologies they developed, far beyond what modern science has achieved, are still being used by certain individuals walking among us today. In our next video, we'll explore the Atlantean connections you've never heard of and share the stories of people living today who claim to carry Atlantean memories and abilities, real or imagination. The evidence might surprise you. Keep following us, because the greatest secrets are yet to be revealed.